All right, the Rebbe began yesterday. This is in the book, the Torah Or, by the first Rebbe of Chabad. And we're learning on the section of the Torah called Vayigash. And it's talking about Yehuda approaching Yosef. Yehuda is approaching Yosef. He's begging Yosef not to take Benjamin into captivity. Right? Yosef is now the king of Egypt, virtually the king of the whole world. And he is, and the whole world is coming to him for food. And also his brothers come. His brothers who had thrown him into a pit. Like 30 years ago, they threw him into a pit. And now here he is. I'm sorry. They threw him into a pit 13 years ago, 12 years ago. Now he's 30 years old. And he's now the king of, and his brothers don't recognize him. His brothers don't recognize him. And now he's able to take revenge on them. But he doesn't take revenge, but he does play with them. He plays with them in order to make them suffer for what they did to him. For make them suffer, not because he wanted to take revenge, exactly the opposite. He tells them clearly he does not want them to take revenge, but just to drive it home, the seriousness of their sin that they did. And then so what he does is he stages this whole scenery where he puts his divining cup into the bag of Benjamin, his youngest brother, and then he plants it there, and then makes a whole sort of a play that he catches him. And now all the brothers are all worried. He's going to take Benjamin into captivity. Our father loves him so much. Jacob loves him so much. What's going to be? And so Yehuda approaches Benjamin. That's Vayigash. Yehuda approaches Yosef. He approaches Yosef. Vayigash. Yehuda comes in Vayigash, and he approaches Yosef. Good. That's what the story was. Historically, that was what happened. But it's written in the Torah to tell us that this thing is not just to be taken at face value. In fact, the Torah is here to tell us that nothing is to be taken at face value. Nothing in the world is to be taken at face value. Everything has a much deeper meaning. There's an infinite, how do you say, plan going on between every single detail in the world. That's called hashgacha pratit. That God personally is taking attention, and he is directing everything in the world, and how we act and how we react, that, so to speak, changes everything. Of course, there is such a thing as truth, and there is such a thing as justice, and there is a goal to the whole business. And the question is how the goal is Mashiach. How soon are we going to reach this goal? To reveal what's really the true meaning behind everything that's going on. So here's a little bit of an example. Yosef coming next to Yosef being approached. Yosef being approached by Yehuda. Yosef is the king. And being approached by Yehuda, that's representative of now, the time that we don't have a temple. The time that we don't have a temple. Why? What's the difference between the temple and when you don't have the temple? Well, first of all, the time we didn't have the temple was like the first 480 years since we got out of Egypt until the first temple was built, was about 480 years. What did we have? We had a tabernacle. Well, the tabernacle is also okay, isn't it? Is it? Yeah, it's okay, but it's nothing like the temple. The temple is infinitely higher, and that's the reason that the temple was made totally of stones and cement. The whole thing was made from stones and cement, which is not, that's the temple. And the third temple will be the same, which is not the tabernacle. The tabernacle was what's much more colorful. The bottom was true, it was earth, but then there was the walls were made from this wood, huge boards of wood, very thick, that they had to carry with them in the desert. And then when they came to Israel, they carried it from place to place when they went. It's true, it stayed in Shiloh for 369 years, but Nevertheless, it moved for 4 different places. That was the tabernacle called the Mishkan. So on the ground was earth, and the walls were wood, and the top of it was furs, animal furs, these strange animal furs. That was how it was. No, that's more colorful. Nothing had to, right? Isn't it? It's more sort of interesting and alive, and it goes from below to above. There's mineral, and then the walls are plant, and the top is animal, which is not the case of the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple is only made of dirt, right? Stones and this. So the Rebbe says, how can that possibly be? So the Rebbe is saying that this hints at the importance of this physical world, and that this physical world contains godliness and meaning and blessing that can't be found in all of the upper spiritual worlds. To the degree that this physical world rose in God's mind first when it was being created. And when was it created? Every second it's being created. It's being created right now. Time is just a creation. So everything in the world right now has infinite, deep, holy meaning to it. Let me just close the door so I don't wake everybody up. But the only way this will be brought out, that there's a method to bring it out. And that's called the Torah, and especially the commandments, and especially the Holy Temple. And that's why it says that the Moshiach is going to build a third temple to show how important this physical world is. Okay, so here we go. Let's go. That's what we learned last time. Hine, behold, near a Baalil, you can see clearly, Gamke, also, this level, Sheish Ba'oretz, that is in the earth. Mili Yatira, a special quality that is in the earth. Before, and he said there's a special quality we can see in the earth, and that is the earth has the power of growth, right? The earth has the power of growth. From the earth grows all of the things we eat. Excuse me. From the earth grows, thank God I'm a lot better. I have a normal voice, big miracles. Don't take anything for granted. So the earth has the power of growth. Everything we eat depends on the earth. Everything. Maybe fish. What about fish? I don't know. But anyway, all the animals and things that we eat, the animals depend on the earth. How so? They eat the grasses and things like that. All the grain we eat, all the bread that we eat, it all depends on the earth. Cheese, things like that. Fish, I guess the fish depend on the water, but okay, so everything depends. Water, of course, is held by the earth. So everything depends on earth. Earth has the power of growth. There's another big thing about the earth, it's got bittul. What does it mean, bittul? Bittul means that earth doesn't do anything except what you do with it. Earth does whatever you tell it to do. Right? Whatever you build a house with it, you build a house, you plant ground in, you plant trees in it, you plant trees in it. Bittul. Whatever you tell it to do, that's what it does. It stays there. Once in a while, there's landslides and things like that. But generally speaking, we're talking earthquakes, right? But generally speaking, that's the thing of the earth. Whatever you tell it to do, you want to build a house, you build it from earth. You build it from earth. You have the basic from earth. The trees that come from the earth. Bittul. Sheyesh bo bechinas midras. Especially, it is trampled upon tachat kapot raglei hakol. It is the basis, it's the floor of everything, the ground. Which is not the case. Plants, shagadolim, that they grow very high. These nasus. Earth keeps a low profile. Ubitl zu, this mitzvah, because of shorshu anayla, because it's so high, but machshava, because earth rose up in God's thought first. Shamachshava bechinas chashev ma. Because this level of God's thought is what created the heavens and the earth. Chashav ma. Right? You read in the Bible, what does it say? That there was the earth, nothing grew up from the earth. There was no growth. There's just earth. Chashav ma, all the planets are made from earth. Made from some sort of substance, a mineral substance. Shehu tachlis a bittul, which is the ultimate level of bittul. Bittul means surrender. Moshe Rabbeinu, like Moshe Rabbeinu says, Nachmu ma. The thing with surrender is that it fits itself in. It does exactly its job. What it's supposed to do, it does. It doesn't deviate from its nature, its purpose. Its purpose, right? What's the purpose? Earth, wherever you put earth, that's what it does. The purpose of earth is to be on the ground, the basis of everything. It's the basis of everything. From there, nimshach mislavish b'chen is a bittul. Excuse me. Excuse me. Guess I'm not totally finished with this thing. Because it comes from such a high source, and it comes down that's why it comes down so low. Because of this, therefore in the future it's going to raise up to be Ateret Baal, the crown of her husband. It says that a woman of valor becomes the crown of her husband. What does this mean? That now we see that the earth is the lowest. It's dead. It's dead. What's higher? Spiritual. The physical world, the whole entire physical world is very low. What's higher than that? The spiritual world. Well, in the future, it's not going to be that way. In the future, the highest thing is going to be the physical. Because that's the way really it is now. Like we said before, that its source comes from the highest. And therefore, the holy temple was from stones, davka. Like also it says in another place in Mizmor Shir Chanukat Bayit. Therefore, we say in the Gemara, Al Koresh, there was the king Koresh. That Koresh came along, Shehich Mitzvah Shechazar V'Tziva LaArav Bot Someach. Koresh, he was like the king over there in Babylon, and he let the Jews come back and build a temple, and he liked the Jews. But in the end, he said, listen, maybe one day I'm going to want to destroy the holy temple. And if I do so, then it's going to be very difficult. So let me put I'll tell them that they have to put wood in it so the wood will burn. It says with that, he sort of made a mistake. That he told them that they had to put beams of wood in the holy temple. Nichbadim di Evan Diglalta says there has to be 3 parts stone, and there has to be like boards of wood, chara 1. So, so to speak, 1/4 of the ceiling would be wood. Because the whole thing was supposed to be from wood, from the reason we said before. In prayer, in tefillah, this is the bowing down in Shmona Esrei, called the Mamadaka. This is the idea of prayer. Prayer, we're supposed to make ourselves like dirt. We're just reporting to God what needs to be done in the world. That's the level of domim. That's why in the prayer of Shmona Esrei, is what's called the standing prayer. The Jews pray 3 times a day. We're standing, we're silent. Not totally silent. This is supposed to say the words that only you can hear it. But nevertheless, this is domim, just letters of prayer. The letters of prayer, that's domim. So that's the whole thing of prayer, is that we say the letters, and the letters are silent. Letters themselves, right, mean nothing. What are letters? Only when you put them together in a word. But that's the whole idea of prayer, that we make ourselves humble, humility, which is not the case in the Mishkan. That's like the Holy Temple, which is not the case in the tabernacle. The tabernacle was in the order of Ishtalshlus, that it is now. On the top, Shetzomeach, that the plants, the walls were made of plant. It was above from the ground, and the top was these skins of animals. That's like it says how the order of creation, the heavens come first, right? God's first of all created the heavens, and then he created the earth. And therefore, therefore the walls were made of these shitim, and that grew up very high. And that's the walls. And the top was even higher. It was made of animal. And the ground of the Mishkan, the ground was made of earth. Here, behold, this is also the whole idea of Yosef and Yehuda. Shehu Gamkein, this is also the level of heavens and earth. This is the level of like plant and ground. The heavens are like plant. They grow up. They go from below to above. And the ground is exactly the opposite. It comes from above to below. It sinks down. Yosef and Yehuda. Yosef is the language of Tosefet, addition. Yosef, Riboy, and multiplying. Shemitvosef v'holech, that it continues higher and higher, like the spiritual worlds. They get higher and higher and higher. Just like plant. And especially especially the plants that the walls were made of, they were cedar trees. That it goes up higher and higher. But we said before, it's the highest of the plant world. King of the plant world is the cedar trees. Like it says, tzaddik katamar yifrach. Like it says, a tzaddik, the righteous people are like a palm tree. They grow like a palm tree, and like an erez, and like a cedar tree in Lebanon. Yizgeh, they get very high. According to Kabbalah, this is the level of Zer Anpin of Atzilus. This is what's called the emotional aspects of God. Atzilut is another name of God. Shenikra, that's called Someach. Legabi HaMalchut, in regarding to the lowest level of Atzilut, which is not the emotions, the Zer Anpin is the emotions of God. This is the Malchut, the lowest aspect, the kingship of God, which is God's speech. Shenikra Domim, it's like a mineral. Like we said before, the letters of speech are like rocks. Remember, we learned that before, that the whole world is made of stones. We said the whole world, when we were talking about Yaakov, when he laid down and he put the stones under his head, it was elevating the whole world, because the whole world is made of stones. How is the whole world made of stones? The letters of God's speech are like stones. Remember we learned that? And the letters of God's speech, they themselves have, so to speak, no life in them. That's why he was able, that's the vessels with which he created the world. That's so if so, the God's plan for creating the world, and like the 7 days of creation, that's called God's emotions. That's number 7. That's a higher level of godliness. That's all spirituality. But the actual physical creation of the world, that's from God's letters, and those letters, that's called the earth. That's the material world. So spiritual worlds, of course, are higher than the physical world. Physical world is just made of God's letters, which are like rocks. Like we said, but along other people, that the emotions, they have what's called smicha. A person's emotions, they grow up. About osios, but letters, they're like rocks. In a person's emotions, there's a people that can be immature and mature. A person could grow up and become more mature in his emotions. Bazeo, that's what it means. Bechinas eitz eretz. That's like the level of the cedar tree, the azov, and also what's called the lowest of the bushes, the hyssop bush. Shehu bechinas. I don't know if azov is hyssop. I think that's what they always translate it. Hu bechinas hakatnos. That's the smallest. So we see that the plants grow small and large. That's the thing. Eretz b'lavana yizkel. Like it says that the tzaddikim, they're very big, they're very high. Yosef, especially, he was the highest of the high. Sha'ol al dat ad ladat. That it says that Yosef is the aspect of Yesod. Yesod, that's above in the 6 emotions corresponding to the 6 days of the week. So it's Sunday corresponds to Chesed, and the Friday that corresponds to Yesod. And the number 7 that already corresponds to Malchut. That's Shabbat. Shabbat, so to speak, doesn't have anything of its own. You don't do anything on Shabbat. Shabbat, almost all the commandments of Shabbat are negative. Don't do this, don't do that. Don't just let Shabbat be. Don't mess with it. It's like a perfect diamond, like a rock. But above this level of Shabbat is the aspect of Yesod, and Yesod that corresponds to Yosef. It says that Yosef ole aradat, that Yesod raises to the level of Dat, and Dat goes up to Keter. Huli. That is the wow. Wow. Excuse me. All right. In the Sphirot, so it says that Yesod, that's like the organ of procreation. And the organ of procreation, that is aroused by what's called Dat. Like it says, the man knew his wife, Dat. And that goes up to the level of Keter, which that's the power of birth. So that's the whole idea of growing. And that's much above the whole idea of rock. The rocks are like death. It's like dead. Like we said, like the letters of speech, alone they're nothing. You have to arrange them according to what you want, what you desire, what you're this. The desire, that's what you put inside of it. But the letters themselves are nothing. So that's the thing of Yehuda. Yehuda is going to show the importance of the lowest, the importance of humility. Nowadays, the plant is higher than the mineral, namely, which we said the plant that represents the heavens. The heavens are before. Therefore, the walls of the tabernacle were made of wood, of cedar wood, and ground was on the bottom. That's Yosef and Yehuda. Yosef and Yehuda, this is the level of heavens and earth, the level of Someach Adomim. Yosef is Tosefet. That's what we said, adding on. Then he continues. Did I just do this? 1 second. All right, 1 second. We did. I just did this. This little pointer skips, and so I'm sorry. 1 second. Yes. Okay, Yehuda. This is the earth. Oh, so I didn't miss that much. That's what we said. There were good. The Keter. With that, good. This is where we were. Yehuda is the level of the earth. Yehuda, that corresponds to the Mashiach. Yehuda corresponds to the 3rd temple, to the temple. This is the earth. This is what's called Malchut of Atzilut. This is the level of the mineral of Atzilut, the lowest aspect of God. Therefore, Yehuda is Hoda'ah. Yehuda comes from the language of how do you say, giving thanks, surrender. Ubitel, negation. Shedomim yesh lo bechin is a bittel, that the where you find the idea of bittel, of surrender, most just waiting to be worked on. That's the earth. It doesn't grow, it doesn't do anything. Hine beseder ishtalshlus, in the level of creation. I mean, to a certain degree, water is also a mineral. to get a certain degree. Water is also a mineral. So the fish also, they grow from water. It's also mineral, but it's not mineral like the earth is. The earth things grow from. You can't grow things unless you do some hydraulic growing or something. Rarely can you grow things just from water alone, from the earth. Okay, so nowadays this with the Yosef he's the highest. Then Yehuda, that's the level of Malchut. That Malchut, which is Yehuda, the lowest level that receives from its life from Zeranpin, from the heavens. Therefore, Yosef is the king. Yosef was the king. Where? In Egypt. He was the king in Egypt. That's like exile. Yosef, that's the level of growing up. Gidel Visnasos, that Yosef grew up. He was the king of the whole world. He was the one that gave to everybody. And Yehuda, he was below. He was the receiver. That's how things are now. That's what it means by Yigash Alav Yehuda, that Yehuda had to approach Yosef. Yehuda was the lowest. He was the lowest of the low. Yosef ruled over the whole world. And Yehuda, he was facing starvation. He was begging Yosef. Vayomer bi Adonin, he said, please, my master, bi also means in me. What does it mean? Perish shabo, that into me. Yehuda was saying, into me, Yum Shechashefa, give please the blessing, give the food, give the whatever it is, the flow from Yosef Atzadik. Spiritually means that the earth depends on the heavens. The earth depends on the heavens. That's the way things are now, right? Come over Zohar, like it says in the Zohar and Parshas Vayigash. The Zohar, Hainu, the Kurvata Alma, the Alma, it says that the one world, namely the physical world, had to go up to the spiritual world. That's how it is now. That's what happens when we pray, right? We're depending on the heavens. We say, send from heaven, Shishlach mina shamayim, from heavens, V'siyayta d'shmaya, with the help of heavens, we say. Hainu Alma Tatoa, this is the lower world, this is the level of Malchut. This unites and raises up to the upper world, Zeranpin, to receive its flow. That's how things are now. The physical depends on the spiritual. That's what it says, like it was in the tabernacle. That Someach was on the top and the earth was on the below. Yosef was on the top, Yehuda is below. The same thing is now. The heavens are higher than the earth, right? All these religions and things, they're all talking about going to heaven, gotta go to heaven. But in the future, Yehuda will be elevated, Yosef, to be higher than Yosef. Like it says, Eshet Chayla Teret Vala. Like it says, the woman of valor becomes the crown over her husband. In this case, the husband is the spiritual worlds, and the woman is like Mother Earth, right? That's the physical. But it says in the future that the physical will be higher than the spiritual. Mitzad Shorsha, because of its source, Sha'olaba Machshava, that rose up in God's thought first. Then we'll see the importance of the commandments, that all the commandments are physical. Because thought is this level of machshava, where it says the physical world rose up in God's thought, machshava. What it means, God's thought. God's thought is chashav ma, this aspect of ma. We talked about this before, if you remember, ma and ban. Hainu, tachlit abitel. Ma is what's called like chachma. We said the koach ma. Namely, the ultimate negation, surrender. Shu bechinas chachma of atzilut, koach ma. Now, this idea of negation is sort of not a good word. It's not really the right word, negation. Negation seems to imply that you had like a zombie, a lobotomy done on you or something like that, that you're not, no, it doesn't mean that. Malchut is very active. Malchut is very productive, like the earth is, but it's waiting for orders. That's the thing. It doesn't do anything on its own. It fits in, it does exactly its job. In Hebrew, it's called hatama. That's the thing of bittul. Bittul means everything does exactly what it's supposed to be. Right, like the heart, the lungs, the liver. When a person is alive, the heart and the lungs and the liver are very, very active, very dynamic. That's called bittul. That's bittul. It does exactly the job that it's supposed to do. As soon as the heart stops doing the job what it's supposed to do, then there's pain, there's fruit that it sticks out, you feel it. Right? That's called egotism. Ma means doing what you're supposed to do. That's earth. Earth is just waiting for orders. Right? What it receives from heaven, that's what it does. But really, in its source, the reason that it has this, because its source is this level, which is called, it rose up in God's thought, called machshava, chashav ma. Ma is the highest aspect of Atzilut, called Chachma. Chachma. Ma. Koach ma. The Hinai, Abba Yosef Bartel, it says that the father, that's Chachma. The father is the foundation of the daughter, which is Malchut. In other words, the lowest level comes from the highest. Because Chachma, low at this level of God's upper wisdom, is called the upper fear. The Chachma Tatoa, and this lower level, this is called Malchut. Upper fear means total surrender to God, total awareness that I am totally nothing. I'm being created by God miraculously every moment. That's called the upper fear. I feel this. The lower fear, Chachma Tatoa, this is the physical world. I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. But on the other hand, I'm totally surrendered to God. Whatever He tells me to do, I'll do. And this is what's called the lower fear. That's what it means that Father, Abba, that's the upper fear, Chachma, Yesod was the foundation which brought to the lower fear. Shemi, Bechinat Yir Eloah, from this level of upper fear of God, that we feel that we are being created every instant. We feel that everything that we are is just a total miracle from God. You're aware of God. That's the highest level of connection you can have to God. That from that, this highest level of connection, Nimshach is drawn down what's called the lower connection of God, but it's a connection of God. And it reflects the highest one. In the future, when Mashiach comes, Titaleh, this level of the lower fear will be raised up into the upper fear. Now you might think, hey, fear is not a good thing, right? Well, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. You see sometimes on the street, you drive your car, you see on the back, no fear, right? So they got no fear on your car. You write this on your car? I mean, your whole thing of your car is based on fear. Nobody drives on the wrong side of the street. You're driving why do you drive on the right side of the street? Why? Because you're afraid of going out. You're afraid, not good. Of course, that's ridiculous. You drive, that's a healthy, proper fear, right? It's a healthy, normal fear. Why don't people just, take pencils and stick them in their eyes or something like that? Come on, you're afraid. You don't want to do it. That's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous. Why don't people cut off their hands? You're afraid. Right? That's stupid. That's a healthy, normal fear that a person has, a normal fear that he wants to do what's right. He wants to live. That's a healthiest thing in the world. That a person has fear that he wants to live. He doesn't want to hurt his next door neighbor because he's afraid of the police. That's why, okay, if you're in such a bad situation, then fear has to come from the outside. But a normal person, he controls himself in a normal way. The Torah comes to tell us what healthy fear is, what the boundaries of the world are. If you feel this, that could be the upper fear. Feeling the God that gave the Torah. If you don't feel it, but you just sense it, right? A little bit, you sense that this is the right thing to do. I don't feel God, but I'm sure down deep that there is such a thing as God. That's called Yira Tato, the lower fear. Nowadays, we don't feel God. At best, we do what God wants to, because that's what it says in the Torah. We have this feeling, hey, I'm a human being. I mean, maybe there's a creator, maybe. Unless you love in the future, it says the lower fear will be raised up into the upper fear, which is its source. The upper fear is a total awareness of God. The lower fear is a very, very infantile awareness of God. A small awareness of God. In the future, everyone will have this awareness of God. Okay, because that's the fact. Okay, and therefore, therefore it says that the lowest level will become the crown of the husband. The lowest level will become above all the spiritual levels. Because this level of surrender, this is the highest level, higher than any sort of love and fear of the emotions, which come from what's called God, with love and fear, chesed and gevurah of Zeran. Look, and therefore also now, yesh the earth. That's why in the earth now has this thing of bittul, has this thing of surrender more, and this is what's called the bittul, the surrender of the upper fear. This is bechinas madrigas Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the level that Moses got to. And also to a certain degree, all the rabbis that are written in the Talmud, the Tanaim, the Amoraim, all the rabbis that came after them. And that's what it's going to be in the Haftorah of Parshas Vayigach. It says, Kach lecha eitz echad. God says to the prophet Ezekiel, take one tree, one piece of wood, and write on it Yehuda, and take another one and write on it Yosef, it's Ephraim, the Korov otam echad al echad, make them come close one to the other. V'hine ani lokeach et eitz Yosef, I'll take Eitz Yosef and I'll make them V'natati otam alav et Eitz Yehuda, and I'll put above them the tree, the piece of wood of Yehuda. Ad avdi David melech aleim, and my servant King David will be the king over them. Okay, what's going on? We talked about this before. In the time of the first temple, as soon as King Solomon died, the kingdom of Israel split. Yerovam ben Nevat, he was told by a prophet to take 10 tribes and make his own kingdom. That was called Yisrael. And down below, there were 2 tribes, Yehuda and Benjamin. They were ruled by King Solomon's son, Rehoboam. And that was called Yehuda. And as soon as that happened, the upper tribes started to sin. They did sins, and they made golden calves and everything like this. It's terrible. And they didn't go down to the Holy Temple. And they became split. And like about 250 years later, something like that, the upper 10 tribes were all conquered and taken into imprisonment. And we don't know where they are until this day. It says only Mashiach will find them. And it says now, Yosef is above Yehuda. That's one of the things that only Mashiach can do. Only Mashiach can decide who Amalek is. And also he'll bring back the 10 tribes. It says also another thing he'll do is he will bring all the non-Jews to drop all the religions. Something that's never been done before. All the world will worship only the Creator. There won't be any more Christianity, no more Islam. The Creator according to the Torah. No more Buddhism, no more Hinduism. All these religions have their good aspects to them, namely what they took from the Torah. Some of them have a lot of common sense. But the fact of the matter is, it's nothing like worshiping the essence of God. This means the world will be filled with this what's called upper fear, the upper aware of God. It says this is hinted at by this prophecy that God gave to Ezekiel. Take 2 pieces of wood, write on one of them Yehuda, write on one of them Yosef. Yehuda is going to be above Yosef. Perish now, Yosef, he's above Yehuda. He rules over the whole. Hu Nimshal, he is compared to like a cedar tree. Asher Gadal, that it grows up very, very high. Also, Yosef, he had the 10 tribes. Like it says, Veshivte Yosef, Chavirav. It says that Yosef, Shivte Yisrael, Chavirav. It was the same thing. Nimsa so comes out that he had more tribes than Yehuda. That's why it's called Yosef, because Yosef is Dat Elyon. Yosef means adding on. But in the future to come, they'll be joined down, both of them together, Yosef and Yehuda together, they'll be totally unified. And that's what it says, Vayigash love Yehuda. That's what it says nowadays, is Yehuda's below. He has to come closer to Yosef, but he's going to unify with Yosef. Echad be'echad, Yigashu. That's going to be in the future. So this, what says that Yehuda is now coming close to Yosef, this is hinting at what's going to be in the future. As Yit'ala, the Yehuda will be higher than Yosef. The Mashiach is going to come from Yehuda. Like it said before, Eshet Chayla Teret Bala, like it says, the woman of valor, woman now is lower. Mother Earth, she goes higher than the heavens. And therefore, then Avdi David Melech I'll call Yisrael. Therefore, my servant King David will be the king of all of the Jewish people. Note that King David, why is he a king over the Jewish people? Because he's called a servant of God. He's the lowest of the low. He's just a total servant of God. He's totally surrendered to God. Nothing on his own. And because of this, he becomes a king over all the Jewish people. That's what it says, Yosef. That's what it said, that Yosef could not stand still. He could not keep himself back. We learned this yesterday in the Chumash class. Yosef confessed to his brothers. He revealed himself to his brothers. Yosef and Yehuda, that Yosef and Yehuda joined totally. Yosef did not conceal himself anymore. V'chibur v'yichud, a unification of the mehave echad be'echad, that they should become one. The upper worlds represented by Yosef and the lower worlds become totally unified. Look what it says in another place, and etc. and etc. Look in another place, it tells these different, etc. Okay, now we're going to understand tomorrow, God willing, we're going to understand that's going to be the difference between Yerovam ben Navat, who came from the tribe of Yosef, from Ephraim, and he was the one that was given control of the 10 tribes, and he threw everybody into idolatry. And Yehuda, all the from whom is the Mashiach is going to come, we'll have an insight into what Mashiach is. God willing, be with us tomorrow. Now we're going to learn the Devar Malchut of this week. We'll continue Devar Malchut.